Let's get started. Hi, this is Michael Danielson. I'm a teacher at Seattle Prep. I'm also the president of Action for Media Education, a local media literacy advocacy group. And today we've got Dr. Dawn Schifrin, who is a longtime Eastside pediatrician for 40 years and a clinical professor of pediatrics at University of Washington School of Medicine. He is quoted in print and on radio and TV as a spokesperson on the impact of media and toddlers through the teen years for the American Academy of Pediatrics. So welcome, Dr. Dawn. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
It's great to be with you and to discuss a obviously very important topic to teachers and parents.
Exactly. So we're going to go through a variety of questions and basically have a conversation about this important topic. I know parents are really kind of stressed out and distracted right now, trying to figure out the best way to parent in this pandemic. So there's a number of challenges besides those that are just here every day because of the media. Now we've got all this extra stress helping parents to manage their kids' lives and their own lives with regard to all this media. What are you telling parents these days to give them some tips about how to cope with this?
Well, first of all, I want to thank all the parents that are joining us today. They're obviously concerned, as well they should be. And if I had one word to describe all this disruption to our lives, I would choose the word overwhelmed. We have multiple pandemics occurring: the pandemic of coronavirus, the infodemic of all this information and misinformation, the resultant national parenting pandemic. I'm calling this the new abnormal. The social isolation, persistent threat of illness, and just the tremendous isolation of being at home. This new abnormal has us all feeling unsafe and uncertain. The result is our emotions have multiplied sort of exponentially. There's no species on Earth more anxious than humans, because we have the ability, and I might add the curse, to imagine a very dark future, and that one of the worst things that could happen to us is now happening. So naturally, our parenting decisions, our individual decisions are all fraught with anxiety, more guilt, and more uncertainty. That's not a good trifecta. And what kind of risks are we willing to take for ourselves or for our children, for our school, for our community? Can we visualize even a reasonable course of action when we're unsure about how much risk is safe, both personally in terms of infection and, of course, for screen time? And how can we weigh the possible educational and emotional and psychological needs of our children with the potential consequences? At the same time, how do we explain this to children who are basically missing pretty much everything in their lives? But there's a paradox here. We're the most capable, resourceful, and resilient species on Earth. We're really good at adaptation. And I have great confidence in parents that they can stay present in this crisis to maintain their ability to create reasonable solutions and provide the safety, physically and emotional safety and security and economic stability to their families. I want to just say to parents that more than ever, you are your family's first responders. And I don't want you to underestimate your parental strengths to face this crisis. From what I can tell, while infectious disease science is telling us how to be a responsible individual, there's no national consensus on how to be a responsible, effective parent. And we're going to talk about how the rules or recommendations are somewhat useless now in terms of where we are isolated at home. We can lament how hard or hopeless it is, or we can network and improvise and pledge to find creative compromises. So I think that that's a really my overview of this conundrum that we find ourselves in, where parents now have the role of teacher and homework helper 24/7 at home in many cases. Again, the idea is that we can now talk about where we are in terms of, shall we say, technology in our homes.
Absolutely. I love that term, first responders, really, because they're there all the time. And as hard as it is for them to manage perhaps their own work, what's going on in their own lives, they've got to be right there to help with the kids too. They're the first responders. I guess me as a teacher, I consider, maybe I'm a second responder or something like that, but we definitely have to communicate some tools and some techniques and some tips that help them manage that? And are you just concerned about just the very sense that students are in front of a screen, even, you know, third and fourth graders, for so many hours per day?
Well, that's a great point. I think before the pandemic started, before March 13th, I think is when all the Seattle schools were let out, which seems like a long time ago, and it is. We knew that the dominant daily activity for most children were screen activities, were technology. And the old African proverb of "it takes a village to raise a child," the old thinking was, I'm not sure the electronic village is doing a good job. But now we've defaulted to screens because the screens are how we get our children to school. And remember that children use screens before, during, and probably after the pandemic to educate and entertain themselves, and to create, communicate, consume, and also now congregate, all the C words.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
we have to think of screens as essential. Now, for old people like myself, we have two lives. We have an offline life and an online life. But to children, it's the same life. It is not different to them. And we have to understand, if we use the term digital natives, we have to understand that they are very facile. And most of the time, they are the chief technology officer in the house. And we have to understand that they need their screens. But the question is, all screens teach. All screens teach. The great George Gerbner from the University of Pennsylvania created that in the 50s. And because it's a dominant childhood activity, what can we identify that the screens are teaching in terms of culture, political, social, religious culture, education? What values do the screen impart? Are they imparting the values that you want your children to learn? Values such as, not like, tolerance, empathy, decency, kindness. And we can talk about that a little later in terms of your youngsters growing up to be good digital citizens, using their skills and this tool to create appropriate content. So I think for parents, the idea is, like most things, there have to be boundaries in the household, and there have to be negotiated boundaries. For instance, when you have a gallon of ice cream, you don't say to your youngster, just, here's the spoon. When you're finished, let us know. Not going to happen. So we have to look at the content on our screens like we look at the content in that ice cream gallon. Maybe not as nutritionally, shall we say, healthy. So parents have to look at what I call the 3 C's. Content, what is it on the screen that they're looking at? And again, some youngsters are great video game players. Is it an appropriate video game for them? Some kids are great at creating content. They want to do robotics. They want to be on the screen a lot. But again, the toughest word in parenting is balance. Okay, that's a very tough word. Where is the balance in life? Are they missing meals? Are they not sleeping? So the boundaries have to be there. Perhaps you have to negotiate technology-free zones in your house. Bedtime. Again, are kids staying up all night, changing their sleep schedules so they're sleeping till 11, they're missing class, or they're not able to be present in class? That has to be identified. So I think for a parent, identify what you can see, and when you identify that, bring that to the forefront and say, this is what I've observed, and I'm worried because. And the same thing goes for homework, I might add, rather than just checking on, have you completed it? What were your test scores? You know, how can I help you with your homework? Or can you show me or teach me about your homework? So parents have to be curious. That's part of the C's, as we would say.
Oh, I like that one too.
So the second thing is, after content, is context. What is the context that they're using the screen in? Is it something for school? Are they researching it? Are you worried about context? Because remember, the internet is a wonderful highway, but there are a lot of, shall we say, very, very suspicious off-ramps that go to not so great neighborhoods. So if you want to look at context, especially for younger kids, we talk about co-viewing, not only curating content for younger children and finding good content for them, which you can find at our friends at Common Sense Media, who have a wonderful thing called Wide Open School and wonderful tutorials for young kids as well as teenagers on digital citizenship. So the context is very important. And again, if you find that their context is great, if they're investigating websites, ask them about, where are you going? Show me what you're doing. If you're going to do TikTok, show me what you're looking at on TikTok, because TikTok seems to be the thing. Or show me your Instagram. What's on your Instagram? Facebook is more for older folks now. And the third thing is, of course, the child. Using a computer or a laptop is much different if your child has learning challenges or is autistic than it is for, shall we say, a youngster that is doing well in 5th grade. So we have to always individualize the use of the computer. But that doesn't obviate, that doesn't mean that parents can't look at boundaries, because balance means that we're going to have balance in terms of not just mealtime and bedtime, but maybe time during the day where we're going to have a digital detox and we're going to all read, or we're going to discuss something, or we're going to watch, if you have older children, what will pass sometimes as a debate on television. And then we can discuss, was that really a debate? Because in high school, if you were having that kind of a debate, you'd be penalized.
That's right.
So
the definition of debate's gone a long ways. So, well, that's great. I love that. Content, context, and child. So for each child, it might be a little bit different.
Yes. And again, the idea of screen time now is sort of being pushed aside, because we understand that there's going to be more screen time than normal, and normal can be somewhere between 5 to 6 hours a day. What we don't want youngsters to do is screen time and multitask while they're doing their schoolwork. And that's where parents need to say, this is probably not healthy for you, because if you're multitasking, your work will be done slower, you will make more mistakes, and it will cost you a lot of mental energy to do both.
Well, and I know as a teacher, one of the most frustrating things for me is I don't have that immediate interaction with students. Even though it's online, it's not the same as a kid being able to approach me during class and ask a question, and you can kind of get a sense of the room. And with technology in between us, as great as it's been, it's just very limited. So I think helping parents help kids navigate these changes is a big tip too.
Well, the idea of my idea of the word parent is it's a verb, not a noun.
Right.
So it's an action word and not a passive description word. And so I have a 4M model for parents called model what you want youngsters to learn and do. Mentor that, saying, did you see what I just did? Whether it's saying please and thank you, washing your hands, wearing a mask, being socially distanced from people when you're at the grocery store. Then monitor that behavior. Have they learned the behavior from when you modeled and mentored that? And then if not, then you have to manage, you have to go backwards and manage that behavior and say, let's have a little bit of a course correction here. Now, some course corrections are easy and some course corrections are very difficult, much like turning a cruise ship around. It takes 30 miles.
Right.
But eventually you do get it turned around.
Exactly. So I know there's an expression you've used, screen time is when you live at the corner of Isolation Boulevard and Virtual Avenue. Right. That's challenging and clever, but also what do you want us to think about that? What does that mean to you?
Well, I think one of the things that we all are experiencing is being at that intersection of Isolation Boulevard and Virtual Avenue, where we're living online, and humans crave human connection, and we're all sort of zoomed out. We have Zoomophobia.
Yes, or Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue. And I think that we need to have parents confident and caring and calm and empathetic when youngsters are really chafing at being so isolated and wanting to get out. Now, 75 to 80% of youngsters are what we call dandelions. They're pretty resilient. We have to show them that resilience. And then we have another 25% that are orchids, and they require very significant, shall we say, work and conditions in order to thrive. And, focus on the now. There's many things that aren't happening, and I think we need to be empathetic and patient. And sometimes that's very difficult. Share with them your concerns, perhaps not all your fears, but your concerns, and empathize with them how hard it is, especially when they have to get off the screens. And really, I think in terms of video games for youngsters, and that's one of the things I get asked about all the time. I just have to finish this level. I just have to finish this.
Yes.
Give them an appropriate amount of time. We're going to give you 5 to 10 minutes, but if it takes a half an hour, that's too long. Okay.
So it's all about boundaries. Very good.
Yeah. It's all about boundaries, but negotiated and logical boundaries, and try not to be, as we would say, draconian and bring down the sword.
Yeah. So a lot of parents are struggling with the whole cell phone in bed issue.
Yes.
Do you have any specific advice for parents who are struggling with the kid gets so attached to that they want to sleep with it, and that can be really dangerous depending on the kid?
Well, we have talked about this, as I would say, from time immemorial, ever since we had televisions in bedrooms, and then we had computer laptops, and now, of course, iPhones and Samsungs. It is impossible to use the word sleep and device in the same sentence. You can either do one or the other.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
Bedroom is a place to sleep. So the concern we have, and what parents should say, is I'm concerned that when you have your device in your room, it is going to either keep you from sleeping or interrupt your sleep. We have great research that shows that 70% of youngsters that have their cell phones wake up at least once a night to check their phone, or they'll get a text that will light up the room and they'll wake up. So in order to get good sleep, we would like you to have a good sleep environment. In other words, if you said to a baseball player, while you're at bat, waiting for the next pitch, why don't you take out your phone and check to see if you have a text? That might take their attention away from batting the ball into the outfield. So we're going to have a good sleep environment. And in order to have that, we have to minimize distractions, the same way we would not ask them if they're doing a test to take out their phone and check to see if they have a message. So I think parents have to be empathetic. They have to be, shall we say, curious. What are you using your phone for in bed? Because let's use it before you go to bed, and then have a moratorium, because we know that the light from the phones bleaches out your melatonin and doesn't allow you to get as sleepy. So eventually kids will go to sleep, but it'll be 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that is not conducive to being awake, alert, and present for, shall we say, a learning environment.
Absolutely. And those are important challenges to set before them. So Dr. Don, we've got a few minutes left. Why don't we start to wrap things up? And I was just wondering if there's anything in particular that you want to say directly to students, to kids of different ages, to help them manage all this. We talked a little bit about parents and having them be a part of the process. Are there things that kids in particular, you work with kids all the time. What are some tips and tricks and some suggestions you'd give them directly?
Well, the first thing I would say to all the children and the tweenagers and the teenagers is that I have great empathy for what you're going through. This is not easy. And I realize you love your family, but being cocooned with your family for the last 6 to 8 months is a, shall we say, challenging environment.
To say the least.
The second thing is that I know you have to be online and you have to be on your screen, because that's how you create and communicate and congregate. And I might add, based on how many times the Amazon truck goes up and down my street, consume. But I want you to think about one thing. I want you to think about what it means in the 21st century to be a good digital citizen. You are using a tool, much like a car, where you have to get a learner's permit. You have to demonstrate that you can responsibly drive this vehicle because it is dangerous. And I'm not equating your mobile device with a car, but it's a fairly easy shall we say, jump in terms of responsibility. You have a responsibility to use this tool with respect, and you have a responsibility to realize what the negative parts of the tool are versus the positive parts. So again, if you're not getting the value that you want out of that tool, respect, tolerance, empathy, kindness, if you're using it to bully, if you're using it to cheat, if you're using it to invade someone's privacy, I would ask you to reconsider that. Look in the mirror and say, what kind of a digital citizen am I? Am I leaving a good digital footprint out there? Okay. And for parents and kids both, I think the big skill for the 21st century is going to be media literacy. In other words, how do we interpret what we see online as, shall we say, truthful? What's the veracity of what we see online? That's the big skill. When we access something, can we critically analyze it? Can we evaluate it? How do we do that? And then how do we create something around what we've just analyzed and evaluated that allows us to create something and then act on that? Because as you know, we're seeing lots of things in our political climate now, which may or may not be exactly truthful. And we hear them. And remember, the more you hear something, the more truthful sometimes it gets. So we're going to ask all of our students and all of our parents to discuss things that they find online as true or not so true, and why. Who is the audience for this particular piece of information that we have now, shall we say, located? Is it meant to convince us of something that perhaps we shouldn't be convinced of? So again, I think that that's the message I would have for both parents and kids, but mostly for children, and certainly not for the 5-year-olds who are using media to learn to read. And I would ask parents to learn, have a online reading. You can read online with your child, or you can read out loud, even to older kids up to 5th, 6th grade. It's a great skill. And it also, again, breaks up that day in terms of screen time, the same way with activities and exercise, not just meals.
Well, I agree 100%. We need to help kids and parents be critical thinkers when it comes to all the sources, and go back to what you said about all media have embedded values. That's really important to, it's part of becoming a good digital citizen, all those great media literacy skills. So thanks for coming back to the end to that good media literacy language. I really appreciate it. Well, Father Don, I really appreciate your time tonight. And in the midst of all this, I think that education and conversation can be a great tool to help us make it through. So thanks again for your time.
Okay, I just had one final message, actually two. First message is I want to thank all the parents again for their concern about this media impact, and urge them to stay calm and curious and connected. And I want to just again, last but not least, reinforce my thought of parents tasked with navigating their family ship through very rough and often uncharted waters. Don't be too frustrated or disillusioned when you can't banish all the fear and uncertainty you have. And please be gentle with yourself, especially with yourself, because again, anxiety and self-care are very much at odds sometimes. And we all have more emotional needs than we have resources. Do what you reasonably can do, but practice some self-compassion. Try to find what brings you and your family comfort and stability, and stay hopeful. Stay hopeful. This is going to turn out to be a marathon, not a sprint. Okay. And my last message is, here's a Band-Aid. Please remember to get your flu shot.
I got my shot. I'm good.
Me too.
That's great. Excellent. Very good practical advice. Well, thanks again for your time. And if anybody's got any questions, they can reach myself, Action for Media Education, our website, or send me an email. Thank you so much again for your time. Take care.
Always a pleasure, and good luck to everyone. Take care.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.